I'll post it up later. So we're recording? Cool. All right, so this one's gonna be not super different from how we usually do workshops, but like I said, it's gonna be a writing workshop. But I don't think I need to tell any of you exactly how to write a story. So we're gonna go specifically over to screenwriting. Like we're gonna spend like 5-10 minutes on like the basic 3 act structure very quickly because it's not super hard to explain. And then what I wanted to do actually was pull up a couple of different screenplays that I've just always had on my laptop from downloading them on the internet and just look at how they're written and like look at the specific genres. I got, I think, one horror, one child animation movie, one drama-esque heady movie, whatever you want to call it. But we're gonna take a look at each of them, just kind of look at their first couple of pages, see the differences in their writing, and then talk about them. So this one might be a little more discussion heavy than usual, but still stuff to learn. So first things first, let me share this screen.
You ever need a partner with helping with teaching screenwriting, I can definitely be a hand.
You read a lot, Julio?
I know all about screenwriting.
Ah, that's perfectly fine. I mean, shit, yeah. If you ever do another workshop later, or I mean, when we do another workshop later, a lot of these workshops end up repeating themselves regardless. And
Sure.
before I say anything, actually, for these scripts I found online, I didn't do anything specific for them. So for all you guys, anyone watching this back, look up scripts online. Half of them, big movies that you all know and love, are literally easily downloadable, but one click on most things. I know a lot of, I know the club's favorite movie is The Dark Knight. The Dark Knight script is very easy to find online. I have it on my computer right now. We can take a look at it if we want to after the other 3 that I've pulled up. But it's easy. It's a great way to actually just remind yourself how things are written and then also just check yourself and, get inspired, not copy because then you'll get sued. But, you know, good place to look at. So, basic 3x structure. Like it says, most things, 3 most powerful number, honestly, most powerful shape was a triangle. Doesn't change anything with screenwriting. As you can see with Studio Binder, a lovely website that has a very nice application to use for helping you screenwrite in your spare time. 3x structure, it's usually split into Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, or beginning, middle, end. And rather than reading through all this, I'd rather look at this little diagram they have right here. Act 1 is usually the setup. It's where you start establishing which characters are going to be there, which characters are going to be at least your protagonists, your important side characters. It's where you do most of your world building. And it's basically where you establish the premise and what the goal of the movie is going to be. This isn't going to be a huge part of your screenwriting. It's going to be important in like literal impact, but like in pures of like amounts of how much space it takes up for the script writing, it can either be a third or honestly less than a third if your story premise is something pretty easy to establish. Once you get past Act 1, get into Act 2, which is the middle, which is usually just called the rising action. It's where things start actually happening. One thing leads to another, one thing leads to another. You establish the stakes. And you basically, that's where you kind of, for screenwriting, put in all those scenes that like make movies in the way that I like to think about it. Is where you have people do their conversation, is where you always like in action movies have some of the not big action set piece that's usually saved for the end in like a Mission Impossible movie, but it's like the smaller fights, the smaller tone beats where you're like, okay, we're building towards something at the end of the day. It's still cool and you like them separate from each other, but they're all building to a big thing that's gonna happen in what will lead to Act 3. Now it says crisis on Studio Binder right here, but in English classes, creative writing classes, it will be just called the climax of the movie. The final boss battle, the final whatever, confrontation, final big conversation. If you watch Malcolm and Mary over the weekend, those kind of things. And then once that big climax happens, it then just starts to fall off, not literally in production, but just the stakes have been made, the stakes have happened, the thing you're worried about has happened, the confrontation has happened. It starts bleeding off until you just, end credits, roll credits, epilogue, or just, happily ever. How do you want to end your movie? So that's the basic 3 act structure. Now,
I have a question.
yeah,
Does anybody remember the word denouement from school when it comes to like the ending of the third act?
no,
What'd you say?
The word denouement, I think.
What did she say? What'd you say?
She said the word denouement. Do you remember the word denouement from class?
Don't know what that means.
Yeah,
No?
Nicole, I think you're flexing right now. Yeah, the end of
I
Act
was
3
gonna
is
ask
called the
if it's the
denouement.
same thing. I was gonna ask if it's the same thing as the resolution, or if it's just like, and if it's applicable for film, or if it's just for like books.
I've never honestly heard of the word. That's why.
Yeah, that's
I know
new to me. I've
It
never
has
heard
to
that
do
thing
with
in my entire life.
screenplays, so I'm not sure if it's. I think it's just a climax of a narrative.
Okay.
It's the fancy French word that they give to cinema.
The denouement. I like it. Sounds nice.
No more questions for me.
That's why. Anyone else got any questions or just quick things you want to talk about before we start looking at some of these scripts? No? That's perfectly fine. Now, first script I have here is just from the Truman Show. It's one of the ones that I always keep on my computer because I love that fucking movie. So, very basic things to go over when screenwriting first. The way that you format it is actually extremely important. You just can't write it as if you're writing a regular story. As you can
Jimmy.
see, oh, someone say something?
I just wanted to say my 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 family's a big fan of this movie.
The Truman Show, as they should be. If you haven't watched it, another one of the ones that you should watch.
Yeah, when
Yeah.
I watched it for the first time, they were like nuts over it.
I'm glad they're here.
Yeah,
But yeah,
this one
as we
last.
look at this lovely screen play, the thing you need to know for screenwriting is font size. Usually Courier 12. That's why all screenplays look the same. Usually when you have a character, you make them center and put all their dialogue underneath. Now some people, even though there's a basic structure to screenwriting and formatting these things, they still look different. Like some people like to add underneath the person that's talking right now, if there's a specific emotion or tone they want to say it, some people like to include it right underneath the character rather than, leave it up to interpretation from the actor or, establish it in this words right here. Now, you got like other acronyms also in screenplays, like OS means off screen. So, obviously whoever wrote this had camera work in mind ahead of time. So they knew that they're going to focus on Truman or at least have Truman in the frame. And then you put off screen. So that way, establish early on, okay, Meryl, she's going to be off screen. She's going to be a voice that you don't see immediately. And whatever creative choice that's in there is up to everyone else. And then you can see what I was talking about earlier. Eager for his response, little things for the actors to know or whoever's doing the table read to know how to just perform this. And also, now this one, I don't see it doing it, but usually also here we go. And when you're transitioning from scenes, you got to put these, let people know that's what you're doing. So interior, exterior, int interior, ext exterior. You establish the basic setting or like the centerpiece of it. So here is Truman's car, but you could also say bedroom of house, kitchen of house, kitchen room, so on and so forth. That's the place, location, and then like day or night or whatever specific time of day you want it to be. All things that you got to put in there, and you'll do this for basically every single scene. Keep doing it, keep doing it, keep doing it. And if there's special notes that you have, you'll distinguish them in your script. But this will always stay the same. The way this looks will always stay the same. So on, so forth. Now, the thing I want to pay specific attention to today is that, like I said, even though formatting is the same, depending on the kind of story you're writing, the way you write just kind of ends up looking like that. So right now we have the Truman Show. And as you can see with the Truman Show, it doesn't start off with dialogue. The way they started off writing the script was spending a lot of time putting the wardrobe into the character, like establishing what he's wearing, establishing the actual setting, and then telling the actor or saying who the character in the movie what expressions they need to be having, what emotions they need to be eliciting, and then they go into dialogue. And if we actually read this, he, make sure he goes into specific detail about the clothes, but he doesn't say much about the bathroom itself. Just behind the fog, sounds of a bathroom, probably didn't care too much about the bathroom, but clothes are super important. And the reason I highlight this is because one of the other scripts, if we go to the screenplay for Inside Out, the Disney Pixar movie, it starts right off the bat with dialogue. If you remember, the movie starts off on a black screen, but starts the movie off with dialogue. As you can see, most of the setting stuff they have in here is very short. They have the dialogue pretty spread out, but you don't see any big chunks of actual setting or like exposition writing in the middle of this. You have actually very short descriptions. This is Riley, now age 3, barrels through the pulling a wagon.
Wow.
Baby Riley cries. You don't hear any descriptors of Riley. You don't hear any clothes choice. You don't hear any specific identifiers besides it's a baby girl. Her name's Riley. She's aging up, so on and so forth. As you can see, quite a bit of the script looks like this. They never put into huge, they don't put too much time into actually describing the literal settings in at least Inside Out for right now, which makes sense when you think about it. For Pixar, those are animated movies. And while color and character design matter extremely to those kind of movies, when you're writing the script, that's more of a decision for you don't need to keep in mind the physical location for that when you're quite literally just creating the location from wherever you're doing VFX from or the animation from. So that's not a huge concern for them. Now, if whoever wrote this had something specific in mind for the character, they could have done that ahead of time, of course, in the screenplay, but they didn't here. And that's my guess, of course. I don't talk to a Disney executive and they were like, yeah, this is why we do it. But when you just think about the type of movie that they're making, it makes a bit more sense. Another thing I like to point out is a lot of the description and just general dialogue in this movie, and even the way it's described and written, is pretty simple. You don't see a lot of complicated words used in like this first page. No flowing expositions, just literally a newborn baby swaddled, Jesus, swaddled in a blanket, held by her parents, push in and zoom into her head. Now, this is another thing that I want to point out. They specifically talk about what camera movements they want in their script in this one early on. You didn't see that in the Truman Show one. They were just talking, doing their thing, setting up the space, but nothing was mentioned about camera movements, at least in the first couple of pages. This one is including camera movements, it's including fades and transitions early on. So if you guys are writing something, it's perfectly okay to start keeping in mind how it's actually going to look in your head, because that's what a screenplay is at the end of the day. It's the stage one of whatever's being made. So, and of course, depending on how much creative input you have into the actual production of it changes. Very few times as a screenwriter, actually, unless you're like, that's just your name, you give them something and what you give them is exactly what comes out. But it doesn't hurt to at least establish what you would ideally want early on, as long as it doesn't start becoming crazy. Like if every single one of these short descriptors had every single camera movement in there, you're not even going to want to read that at that point anymore. It's not a screenplay, that's a shot list. You just do it for the things that really matter to you in your head. Like if you remember Inside Out did that cool zoom in effect with the people. Like anytime they're like about to start thinking or the emotions are about to start, wilding out, the camera would literally zoom in on the character's head and then it would transition into the emotions, joy, sadness, anger, disgust, all that. And I just want to see actually if there actually is any moments. Yeah, no, you can see we're on page 20, 15. Style doesn't change. Only things that ever have heavy amounts of lines on them are the actual dialogues of the movie. Now, this was a children's animation movie, Truman Show, drama-esque movie. Another genre I want to show you guys is horror movies, because we just talked about them. I pulled out It Follows. Now, It Follows, already very different. Another way that people sometimes describe age is just put in parentheses right after the character. Make it quick and easy. You can see with this one is almost written like you're writing a short story in the beginning. Like with the Inside Out one, it was very action orientated. She did this happened. Like you're literally looking at something take place. With the Truman Show one, it was more of an exposition, setting up something and then letting the dialogue do here. This is written like an actual short story for a bit. Stumbles out the front door. She's in her pajamas, save the character. She moves with urgency and a primal fear. And I guess with who wrote this one specifically again, David Robert Mitchell, he preferred to write his script as if you were actually reading a story at first. And it sticks like that. One step, another, click of heels on concrete. And this makes sense for a horror movie because at the end of the day, someone else is still reading your work. And with horror movies, things that, like we said last meeting, are based in just very raw human emotions, you kind of want to make sure that as someone's reading this and is going to put this on paper, they feel those emotions very early on. Like with Inside Out, if its script was lacking a little bit, or just with Disney movies in general, Disney movies are carried a lot by just how they look. They're colorful, they're vibrant. Even if they sound boring on paper, they're gonna grab a kid's attention just from the way they're made. With horror movies, you gotta give like a little bit of an extra oomph when someone's reading this. You have to make sure you're more descriptive because you're not guaranteed vibrant colors, or you're not gonna have some kind of animator or sketch artist just be like, oh, we're gonna have their bodies move all crazy. They're human people at the end of the day. So you need to make sure that it's coming across. No, this is gonna be scary. And you need to establish that early on. Now, I didn't read through this one in depth, but from the first couple of pages, I can also tell that he did not really include any like cinematography shots he wanted specifically. He basically stuck to the short story form of writing damn near his entire time. Even with these long parts like this, it's still all set up, but this is written like a short story. It's not like setting up something, which is cool in a lot of ways. I know we talked about having a production designer workshop one of these days, and something that's good to keep in mind when you are writing scripts is make very clear what props you want and what props you need. Because then when you talk to someone like a production designer after the fact, there's no like chance of something being missed or having to like come up with something in your head. So when you're being very descriptive in a story like this, it kind of works out in your benefit a little bit because you don't need to start guessing what you're going to need later on. It's just kind of you've written it for yourself ahead of time. Any questions so far? Going once, going twice, going three times. Beautiful. Oh, go ahead, Julia.
Question.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like, I write scripts myself,
Yep.
and I sometimes sometimes I wonder if I'm like using too much descriptive dialogue when I'm writing.
Descriptive dialogue, as in just when the characters are not talking, just like literally describing the area.
Yeah, like what you said, you compared It Follows to Inside Out, and you said Inside Out has a lot less descriptive action or dialogue written down. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Never even noticed that myself. Probably because I never read the whole thing. I didn't even realize. But that's just it. I was just wondering. Maybe I could show you one of my own scripts one day.
Yeah, I mean, sure. I'm by no means against it.
I write
And
live
go ahead.
action animation.
Hmm?
I said I write live action animation.
Okay. Yeah,
Mhm.
no, definitely. And just like kind of to a point of what you just said, a lot of what I'm talking about with these scripts are working for the specific drama, or not drama, genre, sorry, that they're working for. But these are also scripts written by specific people. And as you all know, screenwriters aren't going to all write the same, maybe follow the same format, but they're going to have their own special style of writing that's going to translate differently. And to show that, let me pull up a movies of the same genre real quick. I have the script for The Farewell on here. Do you guys remember what movie The Farewell was? Hey, Rahul.
I saw The Farewell with Aquafina.
Yeah, with Aquafina. One about the movie about the Chinese family whose grandparent passed away. Let me pull this up. Ran by Lulu Wang. Or Wang. Not Wang. I think that works better. Okay. And I will see with this one, similar beginning, at least a little bit to the Truman Show, and just establishing setting first, not even talking about the character quite yet. Painting displays an idyllic landscape. be a little more descriptive about what's going on in the place, and similar to the, but different from the Truman Show one or similar. She put the age just in brackets, didn't put it in commas, wasn't part of what the actual reading. But with this one, still, and she did something different. If I'm remembering correctly, the reason, and someone can correct me if they look this up later, but the reason that she put her stuff in brackets was because she is, I think the parts in brackets are parts where Billy is speaking in Chinese. So there are parts that need to be, translated to subtitles if you're putting them in like, English speaking theaters or just majority English speaking theaters. There's something to keep in mind. If you guys got, language changes in your scripts, make sure you have a way to differentiate that. Even if that's, just a description underneath the character's name being like, oh yeah, say this in Chinese and Japanese, or do it brackets this way, whatever is going to help it make it easy to read. It's another big thing about just these script writing practices in general. Always make sure that whatever you're writing is like easy to read at least. I don't mean the premise is easy. You can make it as convoluted as you want, make it a Blade Runner type thing, but just make sure that whoever's reading it doesn't get lost just literally reading your work. Put breaks between your descriptions. Make sure that when you're make sure it's formatted correctly first off. But yeah, put breaks in between descriptions, even if it's just going to be a lot of description before someone says something. Don't make it one long paragraph. Make sure you put breaks in between it. Make sure that someone can have their eyes for a break. Make sure stuff's labeled too, and read it over yourself. You're basically selling. You are still selling an idea of yours at the end of the day, no matter how much time you put into it. So you're not guaranteed someone else's time once they choose to read your script. Having that part alone is already a pretty big step, but it doesn't stop at just the, oh, I wrote something. Oh, I'm interested in what you wrote. Let me see. It doesn't stop at just that. And you're guaranteed. You still have something to be read at the end of the day. So even if it's the best idea on earth, if it's not formatted correctly, not edited correctly, it has minimal to none mistakes, it's not going to be any good. Just because that reflects more on you rather than it does on the actual script. So Julio.
Like when I write scripts, like I'm obsessed with making them perfect. If there's one thing I know, no screenplay is ever perfect. Not even the first read.
Yeah, of course.
So you're saying like at the end of the day, say what you said again, please.
I was saying at the end of the day, make sure that even after you have all the creative stuff in place, make sure that you have all the practical stuff in place too. Make sure it has good grammar, make sure that there's no silly mistakes with spelling and things like that, and just make sure it's formatted correctly. This basic stuff that will show that you're, competent in the best way, nicest way to put it. Um, just like other small notes that I want to mention. There's a big thing with screenwriting is, if you're writing a story, it's impossible to write a story without at least putting a piece of yourself into it. So these things, whether just from the amount of work you put into them or just the literal content of themselves, feel very personal to people. And that's why it makes it very hard when you go back to the editing process to literally kill some of your babies at the time. Because it's necessary. Because when you're writing something, you've like end up with a finished product and you read back at it, some stuff is literally just not going to fit in. Like something that I do when I write stuff is a lot of times I always have a specific scene in my mind. I'm like, oh, this would be a really cool scene to have. It'll be full of emotion. I love it could be shot like this, that, and the other. It'll be great. And then you write a whole different piece, and you find out later the scene that you wrote the damn piece for, or just a scene that you absolutely want, just doesn't fit. Or it just feels like a weird diversion, or it doesn't flow naturally, or it just doesn't make sense in the story anymore. And you gotta just kind of kill your ego a little bit at that point and just cut it there. It's a hard thing to do because I've definitely read some screenplays where it's just like something takes a hard left and you're like, oh, that'd be cool if it wasn't part of literally everything else. There's another small thing to keep in mind. Any questions or concerns before I say the next thing? Nope. Perfectly fine.
I,
Go ahead, Julia.
I think I have a question, but
Yeah.
what do you? Okay, like, uh, are you gonna talk about like writing dialogue next?
Yes, in a second. But there's just one more thing that I wanted to say. I'm also gonna pull up one more script, but the one that has dialogue that I like. I mean, I like a lot of them, but one more thing that I want to say, and then I'll share this again. Um, One thing that I don't think gets said enough, and the reason I say that kill your babies parts is because when you're writing, once you start, working with people, you're collaborating with other people. And the thing about collaborating with other people, especially when you're writing something, is you really have to listen to people. Oh, Jesse just said something. Yeah, everyone read what Jesse just put in the chat. Yumi script is a Google Drive extension for screenwriting. I definitely heard of it. She's very right. It's very easy to use. It's free and it's helpful. So definitely check that out later if you have the time. But on the note of collaboration, you need to make sure that you are, as a screenwriter, when you write something, communicating yourself clearly to other people, but also taking their feedback in well. And knowing how to take feedback well is really important to me because you can go to two extremes. Like I said, these are things are all that are very personal. So if someone comes to you and they're talking about killing off a certain part of your baby, you can't get too defensive immediately. Like if they're saying something that's completely out there that doesn't make any sense and just literally doesn't follow the story, then yeah, tell them, hey, appreciate the feedback, but I did this for this specific reason, or that doesn't make too much sense to me. But if what they're saying makes sense, you can't have too much of an ego and be like, oh, I can't do that. It doesn't make any sense to me. No, you gotta be able to give and take at the same time. And when you're giving feedback and working on someone else's script and editing them, I say this for literally any piece of work. Make sure you give good feedback. Make sure you give good critique and bad critique at the same time. Say what you like and then say what you also didn't like so much because people have too much of a tendency to hear one critique and then they just go through the entire thing, try to edit that one critique and literally forget about everything else they just wrote because they're focused on the one critique they just got. So you fix one problem only to lead into another one. So that's why I say always tell people the good thing about what they did so they don't end up scrambling the good stuff they did, trying to fix something someone else did or someone else said. That's enough for collaboration. Now onto
All right.
dialogue, like you're just saying. This script is the movie Eighth Grade. I really like the movie Eighth Grade. I really like Bo Burnham. And I really like the dialogue of this movie specifically because anyone that's watched this movie knows it's a pretty dialogue heavy movie. For whatever by director's choice or by everyone's choice, a lot of the scenes in that movie are pretty long scenes, as in not a lot of cuts. He kind of just lets the actors do their dialogue and just act it out rather than a lot of jump cuts or just cutting to different scenes or even a lot of action. And so on the note with dialogue, you are writing someone talking. So you have to write like someone's talking, which means this is the part where you can stop being so structured with like the literal words of it. Like if I said we're going to watch a movie, something regular sentence, I don't go around talking to people like that. That's not how I sound. I don't say, "Hey guys, we're going. Me and my friends are going to the movie." No, I'm gonna say, "Yeah, we're gonna go see a flick or something." Whatever lingo for the area that you're in is. That's how you should be writing, right? Like you're actually talking to someone rather than you know stiff dialogue or like stiff talk. Then let's look at the beginning of Burnham's movie. As you can see with this, same thing. Quick setup, establishes the character, doesn't give her any descriptors, just gives her age, and then lets her talk. Now, if you don't remember the beginning, or if you haven't seen this movie, the beginning of this movie is literally her talking to a camera as like, any influencer or content creator will do. Because that's just kind of just how the movie starts. And you can see that something that he chose to do is he includes the so's and the the little adds-ons, the so like, all the little stutters that you'll do if you're ever presenting something. And he makes sure that he includes them in the script. Some people choose not to do that because they're like, oh yeah, the actors will just do that on set when the day happens. That's how some people like to think. He's a lot more meticulous about it. So he literally makes sure to include that type of stuttering is in there in the dialogue itself. And that's also a nice way of not having to like literally put a descriptor underneath the characters, like we said earlier. In the Truman Show script, the character Meryl had the descriptor eager to hear the news, so you knew the character had to be eager. You know, he chose to make sure that when you put in cool, so you can tell she's nervous. You can tell she's stuttering. You can tell that maybe it's not super prepared ahead of time. So rather than writing that as a descriptor underneath the character, he just includes in the dialogue. So who's ever reading it, including the actors, just gets it from the get-go. Another thing, if there's action that's super necessary in the middle of your dialogue, that's where he puts it. And again, that's another like more descriptor thing. Like looking down at her lap, that's something an actor or actress could have easily just done on their own time without having it written there. But he wants to make sure that that's part of the character. And continues on. And the other thing, and like his is really hefty because yeah, really hefty.
When you said dialogue chunks, you were not kidding. That is
No,
no understatement.
no, I was not kidding at all. I'd also highly suggest watching Eighth Grade though, not only because it's a good movie, because it's also just a good movie to watch as a writer, regardless, because of how it's written.
Yeah.
To the point where it's got an award for it when it came out. So yeah, definitely, and you can definitely download this one online for free too. I found this one online. Just been looking up 8th grade full script. Again, find any of these things online. What the hell was I just about to say? Yes, heavy dialogue chunks, but again, there's like specific reasons for this one. She's like talking to a camera the same way I am at the moment, just like talking to an audience, proposed audience. Remember, it's just a 13-year-old girl who's trying to grow a YouTube audience in the movie. So she's gonna talk for a long time. But there are other scenes where they do talk for a while. Now he did his script writing a bit different. Like he started a sequence here, so or a montage. So rather than one long, long paragraph, he breaks it down into a laundry list, like I said earlier. Not just because it's easy to bullet point stuff and be like, when you go back and give this to a cinematographer or director later, you're like, oh, okay, this is the next scene, this is the next scene, this is the next scene, this is the next shot. Easy way to make a shot list, but also it's just easier on the eyes. Like, this is important to have like this, but we can all say that like this, I can get lost reading this easily if I'm just like not reading it out loud. This is hard on the eyes to read, but that's done purposely because that's just dialogue. That's for the character. This easy to read. It's broken up. I can distinguish parts. If I had a highlighter, I could highlight what needs to be where. Easy to follow along. Easy for someone else to work with if it wasn't just me on the project. I also just wanted to find one of the other scenes where she's like talking to her dad because I think those had pretty heavy dialogue parts too. But yeah, a lot of moments in this movie where it's just a lot of dialogue going on. You get to see it by the chunks. So it's great. And there was one other thing I want to say, and I can't remember it. Does anyone have any questions, comments, or concerns while I try and remember what the hell I was about to say?
I do.
Yeah, go ahead, Jesse.
So I've kind of always received conflicting answers with this one from different writers. Where's the line where, like, when it comes to like colloquial language, like I always say, like bro, bruh, etc. Where's the line for that? Because there are some writers like I think it was like Asia Cooper who was like, what, leave that for the actor. Where people like Lena Waithe, she's like, they always say like, write that down. So where's the line between like using colloquial language and having the actor take over versus having the writer take over?
So I think the line first comes with knowing who. I'll answer this in two ways. One, assuming you don't know who you're working with, I think the line is just making sure it doesn't veer outside of the literal dialogue itself. Because if you don't know who you're working with, you need to be very specific about how you want it when you're writing something. So those bros, those dudes, those slang words, hell, curse words, whatever you're doing, those are important to keep in so that whoever else is reading this, if you don't have the time to sit down with them for 30 minutes and explain this is the character, this is how they should be talking, they can infer that they can get that message themselves pretty clearly. So if you're not working with anybody, or if you don't know who you're working with, or you're just writing it on your own, I say keep the colloquial language in there personally, just so that there's no miscommunication about how you want a character written. Now, say you do have a good idea of who you're working with, or you're writing for a setting, like say that you're going to be setting a place in the DMV, in the Maryland area. Everyone knows the DMV has their own lingo. New Jersey has their own lingo, things that are specific to the area. And say I'm writing a script for the DMV. I don't live in the DMV, but if I'm getting actors from the DMV, I don't need to include that like slang in there. I just need to tell them that ahead of time. Hey, make sure that you basically say what these dialogue lines are still, but infuse whatever the lingo is in there, or tell me what the lingo would be that's basically the same thing as the line that I just wrote. Don't change the story, but just say what I put down in a way that is actually unique to the area. That's a time that I would say you don't need to include those bros, those dudes, those because those people know what they're doing. A, assuming that you're working with people who know what they're doing, and B, if you're not familiar with the actual lingo of the area you're working in, but the actors do, you just make that clear to them and you let them take control from there rather than like trying to do it yourself and coming off as stilted or just like because people can feel that thing when you're doing something that's not unique to yourself or just outside of your wheelhouse. Unless you're just a genius, people will feel that and notice it in a work of art, or someone who's from the area will be like, "That's not how we say it." It's like in perfect examples, like when you see screenwriters that write something in a different language and they obviously did not consult a language translator or did not consult someone that's native tongue is the other language. So they're just saying a bunch of stuff in like the first grade teacher's way of teaching Spanish rather than like actual colloquial way of speaking in Spanish. It's different. So it's like it's that exact same way of thinking. What's up, Julia? I thought you raised your hand.
Ooh. Oh, yeah. When it comes to writing dialogue, I do my absolute best to make it make it like funny and original. And I mean, like like what what are your suggestions for like writing strong, better dialogue?
My suggestions for writing strong, better dialogue would be don't use dialogue to exposit things. Like, don't, and what I mean by that is like, I think people notice when someone starts rambling in a movie. Like, if someone, it's like if someone in the middle of the movie started acting like a narrator. They're like, oh, these are the, you know, Rucker 7, and they like start expositing, unless it's like done in like style and like that's the point of it. If someone spends the next 10 minutes explaining the story to your face or explaining things that could have literally been shown to you, that's not good dialogue. That's like not adding something or serving anything. If you're saying to me, or an actor is saying to me something I can literally see in the movie with my own two eyes, then that's like a waste. They can be using that time to like say something that's specific to the character, say something that'll be memorable or just serves the plot and moves it forward. Like rather than someone being like, I just stabbed my brother, have them say something like, what the fuck have I just done? Like have them like, explain what they're doing, but like don't literally explain what they're doing.
So
And that's not, yeah, wait, so go, sorry.
so you mean what you're basically saying is, which is the one rule of screenwriting, is show, don't tell.
Yes. And whatever you're telling, make sure it's worth it.
You're right.
Yeah. And another thing that just reminded me as I was talking was when you're writing dialogue, make sure that you're writing the characters exactly how they would speak too. Like I think something that can be like a weirdly easy trap to follow in is when you start writing everyone almost in the same tone of voice. Like it's like stupidly easy, simple thing to say, but it's just kind of hard in practice at times. Know how your character is gonna speak. Make sure that if a character curses more often or they're more abrasive type, write them like that. Write that in their dialogue. Don't have everyone just saying the same. Don't have everyone saying their lines in the same way. Change up the language. If someone's a more eloquent speaker, use some fancy ass words in there. Be like, oh yeah, it's very lucrative business. I'm a high baller. Have them using a bunch of analogies while they're speaking. If someone's more of a brunt type or this doesn't have like super fancy education, be like, no, I'm stacking my paper, I'm stacking my bills, I'm fucking getting a bag. Use the lingo of the character. make sure it's specific and like actually unique to them rather than just making it a universal catch-all for every character because then everyone's boring.
Yeah, everyone's got to talk a different way.
Yeah.
I know what you mean.
How are the actors supposed to memorize all this stuff, especially like these lines? It's huge.
It
I don't
is
know.
huge. I mean, being an actor is very hard. On the one hand, you got to memorize a bunch of stuff, and I think from what I've seen, there are ways to make it easier. Like, I don't rarely, if at all, do I think there are many actors who literally memorize an entire script before they start filming. Of course, they read it, so they go through it. They do table reads, of course, and like they know what's gonna happen. But when it comes to actual memorization, that's why you schedule things. That's why you're like, we're shooting this scene this day, we're shooting that scene the next day. Memorize these lines for this scene. Okay, you know that this scene's gonna be in 2 days. Start memorizing the lines for that, and you take it by chunks. You don't be like, oh, here's a script once. Okay, you don't get to see the script again. No, 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 no. They got scripts on set for people to remember. Obviously memorizing your lines will make things go a lot faster, but they got scripts on site so that if you forget something, you remember it. And they just make sure they do it by chunks, so you're not having to just do it all at one point. That's half the reason that even like long takes are impressive. Besides just, seeing a lot of cool stuff without editing happening is always good for the heart. It's impressive to see an actor remember so many lines and like be able to perform them to a T. It's
Yeah,
purpose. We all know it's hard.
I guess someone can't memorize every like and so that this girl's saying anyway. So you
Yeah,
just add those in.
exactly. Unless you're literally just have a photographic memory, but
Yeah.
that is not most people.
I think Anthony Hopkins mentioned once in an interview that he just memorizes the script or just rereads the script until it's like just natural for him to say it. So
That makes sense.
he is a god among actors, and he plays the piano, and he has a cat. Yes, I follow him on Instagram.
Good man. But yeah. That was dialogue. And I think the only last thing that I really wanted to touch on was I wanted to pull up an action movie because I wanted to remind myself whether or not they like how hard they include the action in the actual movie. Because we could literally do an entirely different workshop about stunt choreography and just stuntmen in general because they got their whole own shtick going on. If any of you like stunts, become a stunt coordinator. They get paid pretty well. You just got to be able to take a hit. Dark Knight, here. And if I'm remembering correctly, we all remember. Well, has anyone here not seen The Dark Knight? You don't need to out yourself either. We know there are haters in this club for people that haven't seen The Dark Knight. Yeah, I'm pretty bad. But
Sorry, guys.
you're good. You're good.
All that. I've seen The Dark Knight.
Yeah,
Great movie.
great movie.
Heath Ledger stole the show.
Wait, what bracket did you guys do last week? I couldn't make it. I'm just
We did
curious.
horror movies. We did horror movies last week.
What ended up winning?
Aliens.
Like the second one?
No, the first one. The first one.
Wait, isn't the first one just Alien? Or is there two
Or Alien.
aliens?
Alien. You're right. Sorry. Alien.
Alien one? Okay. That's respectable.
Yeah, it was between Alien and Get Out, if I remember correctly.
And we decided Alien was the winner, didn't we?
Yeah, we decided Alien was the winner based off of Alien was probably closer to a horror movie than Get Out was.
Those
Jesse.
clowns had names.
Yeah, the clowns had names.
Those guys in the clown masks, they had names.
I'm assuming that they showed and they just like are talking about the emotion the clowns had on their face. I want to see where's the part where they pop out of the bus. Yeah, okay. I just want to see how they like explain how they write action in this. Yeah. Okay. So you can see with the way that this was written, they like purposely include the kind of facial expressions they want in their character. Like the bank manager's eyes go to wide, Joker rises, strolls towards the bus, purple thread, blows the place up. School bus pulls out. Yeah, so they definitely include the action in a little bit of a pretty descriptive way. But yeah, that's pretty much all I want to say for that today. What was in chat?
Scarecrow.
You want to see a pic of this brat, guys? Hold on.
Wait a minute. Who's Scarecrow?
Where do you see Scarecrow? Oh.
The Scarecrow's not in this movie.
In the Dark Knight?
No, he's not. Who's Scarecrow?
Was Scarecrow in the Dark Knight? I don't think he was in there.
No.
He's
think
in
he
the
was in for
comics,
one scene.
obviously, but like, you know.
This is the scene where they were in the parking lot or the parking garage. I didn't realize that was Scarecrow. I have not seen that movie in a while though, so. But yeah, no. Let me actually before we start veering off into this side topic of showing off his list real quick before meeting's over. Any other questions, comments, concerns about just screenwriting in general? Going once, going twice. Then perfect. Then I'll call that the official end of the dialogue workshop today. Thanks for coming, guys. I'm not gonna close out the media. I'm gonna show you guys. I'm gonna stop the recording though.